Conscience hath 1,000 several tongues, and every tongue brings in a several tale, and every tale condemns me for a villain. It is that thing we do not talk about, that in the deepest corner and the recesses of our mind and our soul and our being comes forth within our own passion to tell story. For there is no good without evil. It's the darkness that is the most fascinating aspect of what we do. It has the most depth. It has the most reach. It incorporates the most forethought. So here, this season on 21 Grams, we examine the part of the soul that we often try to bury or not talk about. They say that 21 grams is the weight of the soul. But what is the weight of sitting in darkness? This is what we aim to discover this season. Welcome to 21 Grams with your host, Joe Compton.
We all sort of have an idea of what the Holocaust was and how we commemorate it. But all of these assumptions are challenged when Nazi euthanasia comes into Holocaust memory.
Concentration camp victims or more sympathetic prisoners were seen more as martyrs. The euthanasia program, it was poorly understood. There were German victims, they were disabled victims, and it just didn't garner the press or the interest.
This is a mini golf course over here for when they have visitors. They can go over there and play mini golf.
My great-grandmother got killed by the Nazis in the T4 program, the program that killed people who were in psychiatry.
It was an assembly line production of death in which everyone was complicit.
There was basically no persecution. They were put back in high positions. They made careers after that.
Who did?
The perpetrators.
There are two components about a story becoming tellable, so to speak. On the one hand, is there somebody who can tell the story? And then on the other hand, of course, is there somebody who listens to it?
There's this memorial to the killing of people with cognitive and psychiatric disabilities, and then there's still a functioning psychiatric hospital. And I was wondering if Frau Hoffmann could tell us her thoughts.
It wasn't really accessible for people in wheelchairs. The director came out and told us we can't access the exhibit. So we said, yeah, we'll just make it happen.
A lot of the population knew about these facilities and were just too afraid to say. And they're shown as trailers before these feature films, showing these purposely grotesque images.
All the families, also my family, were lied to.
They had all of these deceptive ways of coaxing.
We didn't know what we were looking for when we came here. Like you had just picked up a camcorder from a store. There's like this energy of discovery.
I've never been in this gas chamber. I didn't know it was quite as deep as it was. And it's very rough inside.
For me, the whole area is a cemetery, not just the crematorium.
You never lose that sense of human bodies filling up the space.
What happened with all the peoples in that time? Where do they hide their memories?
The government, the leaders of the memorials, they didn't think that this is an important aspect.
And the victims did not get anything, except even more pain and getting hurt.
That powerful and incredible journey was documented by the gentleman sitting right next to me here, and I've had the absolute 100% privilege of being able to talk to Cameron before and talk to him about everything he's done and everything he's doing, and this is one of those that's just amazing, and we will talk about that, but it's kind of, I hate to say ironic because that's not really very fair, but we lost a member of the advocacy of disability rights movements just yesterday in Alice Wong. She died at 51. She was a writer, producer, editor. She had incredible impact on the disabled community, and a lot of her writings were about how ableists were neglecting, certain rights and certain things, and she brought a lot of things to the forefront that brought legislation to the nation and to the world, and so we just wanted to spend some time to acknowledge her first and foremost. And Cameron, I know you wanted to say something about her and her influence for you as well.
Yeah. She has a great first chapter in her book, Disability Visibility, where she discusses her encounter with Peter Singer, who is an animal rights activist, but also is horribly biased against people with disabilities, argues for their right to die. They're basically argues against their right to exist to an extent. And so in that chapter, I think if evil were ever described, it is in that chapter in her encounter with Peter Singer. And she does such a brilliant job of navigating it much more sensitively, and discussing and describing how his students look at her and ask questions, and how this pilgrimage that she makes, there's just so many great details, like how through email there's a bit of testing from Peter Singer about going on a walk and whether she could endure it in the cold, and things like that. So if you haven't read it, check it out, and of course also check out her other work as well, but I figured I would mention that given our subject matter today.
Yeah, she also wrote a book called Year of the Tiger, it is very poignant to what we're going to talk about a lot today. And so one more gift that she's given us to kind of kick things off today, and she will be sadly missed in the community. I know there's a lot of people reeling today, and so we just wanted to acknowledge her and make sure that she got her proper due for who she was and what she's done.
Also in her the statement that was posted to her social media accounts, she said, and I'm paraphrasing here, but that we need the stories of our community, and now more than ever, and don't let the bastards grind you down. And Disposable Humanity is really a film about remembrance being resistance. And what we mean when we say that is that the Nazi agenda was to wholly erase disabled people from the face of the earth. And so in remembering and telling stories about T4, we're actually actively fighting against the Nazi intention.
Yeah, for those who don't know you, kind of give us a overlay of your career and who you are, so that people can get a sense of what you've accomplished here.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you know me, Joe. We met at Slam Dance when I had my first of 3 films now that I've had there, which was a narrative short called The Co-op. There were some commonalities between that film and this one, in that my family was also in that film.
Yeah. The same star. You're utilizing the same actor for the same.
I keep going back to the well of my family in documentary and narrative form.
Tired of being typecast at this point?
Well, I think he definitely enjoyed getting a chance to be himself in this film. Although I did write that role in The Co-op for him, and the role for my sister Emma as well, just to be themselves, basically on camera. And for the uninitiated, The Co-op is about a grocery store robber whose plan goes horribly awry when he targets a grocery store that turns out to be full of disabled people. So my work is basically always about how disabled people complicate the lives of the able-bodied in ways that they don't expect, nor can explain, until you go through the work and experience it, and then you learn from it, maybe, or maybe you enjoy it, or have a cinematic experience with the work, which is really the power of film. Is it's an empathy making device, right? Film gives us the power to transport ourselves into different perspectives, different bodies, and I use that to my advantage as a storyteller, to tell these untold and seldom heard perspectives. So Disposable Humanity is really like the culmination of a lot of my short film work in the narrative and documentary space. It's a film I've been working on basically the entire time that I've been a filmmaker. And before I get too far into that, Disposable Humanity is about my family's investigation of the history and memory of the Nazi action T4 program. And what does T4 mean? T4 is the address of the administrative building where 3 medical professionals would grade medical forms called Meldebogen in German. And they would mark the forms with a red plus if you were to die, or a blue minus if you were to live. And they would pass these forms down in order so each physician would see the markings of the previous physician, effectively influencing their work.
Mm-hmm.
So the T4 program, as my family reveals and the film reveals, actually catalyzed the Holocaust. And so the film is about why is that missing from our understanding of possibly one of the most told, darkest chapters of human history.
Yeah. I'm curious, when do you remember the first time you had heard about this program and uncovered this part of this horrible history?
Yes. Yeah, I remember it vividly. It's actually one of like the crux moments that made me an artist, I think, or started getting me engaging in art, because the first moment that I heard about T4, or I think where it sunk in what it was when we found out about it together while my parents were presenting on the history of American eugenics in Germany. And at the end of their presentation, there was a Q&A, and a gentleman stood up and said a very long paragraph in German that none of us understood. And the translator actually refused to translate at first what he had said. And then eventually, after some cry from the audience, no, you must translate what he said. It turns out that he was saying that, they did this not far from here. They did what you're talking about, American eugenics, what you're presenting on eugenics, just eugenics, in fact, right around the corner. And so we had never heard about this. My folks who studied this for a living had never heard about the Nazi Action T4 program in the late 90s. And so my mom buys a camcorder from a drugstore down the street, and then we go to one of the 6 T4 killing centers, and they start filming, and they make this documentary short called A World Without Bodies, which is about really their response, their initial reaction to landing at this site and this discovery. Now, of course, after they film, they go and they research it, and so the film has a lot more depth added to it. But I remember being there that day and having the memorial director come out and say, look at my dad and my sister, who were both in wheelchairs, and say to them basically that they weren't going to be able to get in, that the exhibit wasn't accessible to disabled people.
Right.
So, being the interdependent family that we were, I carried my sister and my dad down the stairs into the basement of Bernburg, which is about 20 minutes outside of Berlin. And we proceeded to go through the exhibit, which included a completely intact gas chamber, an autopsy table, where they would kill disabled people. And what was really interesting is that there were steps on the way into the gas chamber. So you would be bringing disabled people to this incredibly inaccessible space. So the Nazis were so set in their ways, they couldn't even functionalize mass murder. I always found that interesting. And then on top of that, I sit down in the gas chamber, which is this black and white tile, alternating tile, all around the room, and then like a rear view mirror in the corner, so that the nurses would be able to see the last signs of life leaving the room from the observation window in the door, reflected in the rear view window, kind of, or the mirror installed in the corner of the room. And I start to draw it. And I turn this drawing into a book, a small comic based on Art Spiegelman's Mouse, where I animate myself and my family as mouse characters, because I had never seen disability represented in the Holocaust before. You know, I was 8 years old. I was reading or had read the Diary of Anne Frank, and I was obviously reading Mouse. And those were two very already impactful pieces of work for me as a kid. But, you know, that was my first response. So that was kind of one of my first inclinations, or where I noticed that I had this artistic instinct.
Did you have some understanding of what you were sitting in? Did you feel it? Was there something inherently inside of you that you felt like the evil or the darkness that you were perpetrating at that moment in sitting in that room?
Well, I wasn't perpetrating it, but
that was the wrong. I apologize.
No.
But just
that I was entering.
absorbing.
Yeah, that I was. Yeah. I mean, the first drawing I make, the tiles are kind of warping. The room I drew the room as if it were viewed in the rear view mirror that was installed in the corner. So the room is kind of warping in the first picture that I drew. And so I think that was also a sign of the perspective that I was going to bring to this eventually. But, 15 years in advance, basically, of what the film releasing, and a decade in advance of the moment that I took a camera and traveled with my family to Germany for 2 months to do the principal photography. But I was already thinking about perspective in that. And because I think perspective is actually what enables you to take the space back from that feeling of just incredible loss of life in the room, because it does feel heavy. The room feels like many lives have passed through it and have been lost there. It's really, I don't think you can actually convey in an art form the exact feeling without going to the space itself. But the attempt at doing that, I think, is kind of what helped me start to rationalize or understand, or not even rationalize, because there is no rationalizing it, but to empathize and connect with those victims.
So when did the pursuit of the knowledge of what was going on there begin for this project? Do you feel like that was the moment, or do you feel like you and your father were building something, and at a point you had some stuff and you were going to go, okay, now it's time to go back and let's do this?
Well, my mom and my dad actually were building, like, they always kind of incorporated my sister and I in their work. So one of their most cited works is actually a really interesting book for the topic we're discussing today. It's called Narrative Prosthesis. And if I were to give you the extreme spark notes of it, it's basically like the idea of like Verbal Kint in The Usual Suspects, or Dr. Arliss Lovelace in Wild Wild West. This disabled character who is narrativizing through their prosthesis. They are advancing the plot or the story with their disability, and it's not a pro or a con. It's just an observation, and it's a theory that's been so impactful that many people have tried to poke holes in it, and I don't think anyone really has succeeded in doing so. But so there's a chapter in that book where they write about my fascination with the Nutcracker as a kid, and the toy soldier, the disabled toy soldier, the one-legged toy soldier. And so, yeah, it's really like I didn't get to choose. I kind of arrived in this family that was always doing this. And I was along for the ride the first time we went, and none of us knew that was going to happen. So it was really serendipitous. And then from there, it kind of changes all of our paths, I think, because they start leading classes to go back. We revisit the sites. We visit new sites continuously every couple of years. We keep going back to Germany and making pilgrimages, because that's kind of how my folks work. They read disability onto things cross-culturally, internationally. Disability is this idea that can kind of cut through cultures and identities and unify us in a way, or at least that's how I've always interpreted some of the work that they do, and what I try to do in my film work as well.
Yeah. We talked about this when we got together in January. There's a poignant moment in this film where your father is just sitting there absorbing all of this. He's sitting in that room, and you got him down to a level you hadn't got him down to before in the basement area there, and
the gas chamber.
Yeah,
he's inside the gas chamber,
and just watching, and you do this. You do this brilliant thing because you're so brilliant with. I mean, the camera, your camera eye is above and beyond anybody as I've ever seen, and you just focus in, and you just let that moment happen, and it's so poignant and so powerful, and for you behind the camera feeling that, how difficult was it to kind of just film something like that and just be there for that moment, or was it cathartic, or did you have some kind of release? Was there something, I don't know, just instinctive that you feel like that was the moment that you were leading up to for this entire thing?
Yeah. I imagine that you're talking about the moment where he's in the room and he's describing it, and he's talking about how
and he's just his lips are quivering. I mean, everything about it. He's because he's absorbing every like it's almost
right.
Like he's seeing it in his head.
That's really a moment of disability justice, right? Because he is going into that room for the first time, and imagine this is a man who has dedicated a portion of his life, at least, to the study of this, and we're matching shot for shot the shots from their film in the 90s in 2017. So this is almost 20 years later. It's 20 years later, and he has never been able to get into this room before. And so I think nothing makes it more apparent that accessibility is such a restriction on disabled people's lives that, I, for one, knew that this was going to happen to my dad once he was actually allowed in there. And by the way, we bring our own ramp to make that scene possible. It's not even something that's in the memorial site. It's our own metal folding ramp. And
you show the point where you carry him at a point too in the film. There's the
opening scene of the film. We're carrying him off the train to Auschwitz because there isn't an accessible train, or we're told that the accessible train is only for disabled Polish people, and that it's an advanced scheduling system. It's a lot of basically BS.
Bureaucracy and red tape.
Yeah,
garbage.
And so I wanted initially to make the opening scene a shot of for years, the only representation of T4 in the U.S. Holocaust Museum was a doctor's jacket and a bed. And it was in the corner of the museum. And there was one plaque just commemorating T4, and that was it. And so initially I'd wanted the opening scene to be that setup and talking about it. But the train scene ended up just taking over for that, because it wasn't just T4. When you see that train scene, you realize that eugenics is everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's everywhere that there isn't accessibility, but especially involved in the memorialization of places where disabled lives were lost, and a lack of consideration for the disabled people that would want to go to those spaces and remember.
And even after all these years, when we have the capability of making that happen, that's terrible.
Yeah. So that became the opening scene, and there really wasn't a question once we put it there. It just fit and then didn't change. It stayed there, even though the opening 3 shots are on an iPhone, which I really had to fight myself to, because I want everything to be on the camera we shot the film on.
Yeah.
But sometimes the best camera is the one you have available, in a situation of opportunity to capture something. So,
and in the documentary too, you hate to say this because I know you're a perfectionist and you value your craft, but in documentary you can kind of get away with that with handhelds and shakiness and things like that, because it's a documentary you're documenting, so it's not like we're not setting up shots where it would look canned. It would look weird if you did that.
Actually, well, it's interesting you say that, because one of the movies that inspired me to get over it was Superman. There's a Superman that starts on a cell phone, and I saw that in theaters, and I was like, well, if they can do it for Superman, if they're vying for this aesthetic in Superman, I can use it, right?
Fair enough. Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned Verbal Kint and the books that you talked about, that was kind of an inspiration or a catalyst to you moving forward with a lot of this, and there is this weird idea about villainy, right, where we fetishize a little bit of the villainous aspects of things, and where we can see the point of the villain. Good villains are usually the ones where they try to convince us that they're right, and in a lot of respects, sometimes we agree with what some villains do, and maybe not in the manner they do it. But there is that fetishism towards that. But having seen real life villainy, does that change your perspective on because you're a narrative filmmaker as well? You do narrative, things, and you also work on other projects that are narrative. Do you have a different perspective of the villainy because of this experience, or do you feel like you can compartmentalize and differentiate between the two?
Well, it's interesting because, knowing I was coming on this show and that you're focusing on villainy, of course, I had to talk to my dad a bit while we were at one of our film festivals this past weekend about it. And, I was, I'm already coming onto the show with the idea of Robert J. Lifton's doubling as a concept, Hannah Arendt and the banality of evil. That's villainy in a very studied in a very serious way,
right?
But people trying to unpack, because we know that where the scholarship has landed is that these were everyday people. And so, in fact, in Holocaust education, where you start is that these were quote unquote normal people, and that they were offered double, triple pay, and they were offered career advancement. So junior physicians would become senior physicians, and they were offered extra rations of schnapps and alcohol and things like that. And so there is that banality of evil argument there, but evolved to this point of, okay, and it's hard for people to wrap their heads around, right? You know, to be told that these were everyday people. But that's what the brown shirts were, right? That's the exact idea, is you put a brown shirt on and then you're a part of this Nazi movement all of a sudden, and you're enabled to do all of these horrific acts, and beat people up in the street, which is it's what's going on right now, for just not to mince words, in the United States. It's happening right now.
It's happening in the Middle East as well. I mean, it's there's just cleansing and genocide going on in that aspect of it too, and people are being forced to take sides. That there's no humanity side, right?
Well, the important thing to remember there is that Robert Lifton was really emphatic about this when we interviewed him at his house. And the late Robert Lifton, now he recently passed actually. But he was very emphatic that, and to the point that after interviewing all of these Nazi doctors and spending time with their families and in their houses, trying to understand why they did what they did, he concluded or argued that it was the mysticism around Hitler that made eugenics possible. That made the Nazi vision possible. So it was Himmler, it was Karl Brandt, it was the people around him trying to imagine what Hitler wanted that made this possible. And the cover of war was extremely important to Hitler, to the point where he backdated the memo for T4, the unsigned memo that was never a law, but was made because doctors wanted permission to kill. They were like, on which law level does this occur? Where do I have permission to do this? That's what they were concerned about, because that's how popular eugenics was. So it was backdated a month to coincide with the start of war. And so war is it's crux to covering up fascist acts of evil, basically. And we can't forget that. We can't forget that there are leaders that send us to war, and they make these decisions intentionally to do these things, to unleash this energy. So to bring it back to the what my dad and I were talking about, we basically came to the conclusion, there's one footnote in the 600 plus pages of Hannah Arendt's totalitarianism about T4. One footnote. It kind of has that feeling of somebody mentioned, hey, maybe you need to include something about this, but what we came to was that evil was, it wasn't doubling. It wasn't the banality of evil. It was eugenics. So it's not maybe the quote unquote sexy answer in terms of like going with Hollywood's notions of villainy and what they are. But what I really think those are descriptions of darkness, because we very much use a lot of techniques in the film to help you feel like you're in the space, but with the Mitchell family, which is really important.
And it's also drawing on fear and the aspects of the human nature that quell that up in you, and kind of bring that. That's where the true villainy lies, is how you absorb what you're experiencing, right? And then you may not be villainous per se in the terms of pure evil. You might be doing villainous acts, like we're talking about brown shirts and things of that nature. But and they may have regretful thoughts afterwards. I'm sure some of them do or did,
Yeah,
but
there were doctors who killed themselves and their families. But there were also only 11 Nazis that were executed at Nuremberg, and the rest got away.
Yeah,
they might have been brought to trial again, but then they were found unfit to stand trial, and then they went back to practicing medicine in Germany, and they're still here today.
I'm curious your thoughts on like a film like Downfall as an example, right? Something that kind of, it doesn't fetishize Hitler, it does kind of the opposite, but it portrays a moment in time, right? That you literally were in a time warp. You were at a place where time existed, where these things happened, right? And watching something like that, are you able to compartmentalize in that aspect a little bit, or do you feel like movies like that, just anything that romanticizes or even and it doesn't really romanticize, but you know what I mean. It brings
it does.
It
actually does. It does romanticize it. That's the right word for what Downfall does. Because and also what this film Nuremberg does, that's in theaters right now. It's unfortunate, but Hollywood continually gets historical accuracy wrong when it goes to portray these things, in large part because Hollywood, much like our major political system, refuses to acknowledge eugenics.
Yeah.
All of these parties refuse to acknowledge eugenics because it means that you have to unpack reparations, you have to unpack land acknowledgements, you have to unpack, all of these things and acknowledge the rightful owners of that space. And so, if you know that the Wannsee Conference House is also the site of where they decide on the final solution before it's ever called the final solution. The plan was not to murder Jews. That was not the initial Nazi plan. It was deportation to Madagascar, Belzec, Lublin. And then...
Gee, I wonder where we've heard that rhetoric before.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, deportation, immigration law, all incredibly important in eugenic thinking, actually, because immigration law is about what the nation wants to put forth as itself, how it imagines itself, or reimagines itself. So, right now, Marco Rubio is calling for the reinstatement of eugenical immigration laws that we had passed in 1917 and 1921. And so basically not allowing obese people into the United States, people with pre-existing conditions, on the arguments that they could become sick. And so that's a part of eugenics. Eugenics is not wanting certain types of people around anymore.
Yeah.
Whoever you don't like. And what's interesting is it says it's a specific thing, but it's actually very stretchy. It's meant to expand, like, the Nazis gave false diagnoses to people. A large swath of people were just called antisocial. And it could be because the daughter of a family didn't go to a Nazi ball, for instance. And so these terms become so stretchy that they can really be applied to any resistance, anybody that they don't like. So important to note that as well.
You've been traveling the country, the world with this documentary now, and you've experienced many different screenings and Q&As and things of that nature. What has been the most surprising aspect of what the audiences have given you that you didn't expect when you're showing this to them?
Well, there's many, but one that always comes to mind is in one of our first screenings, which was actually a test screening with Forward Doc, which is an organization for disabled filmmakers and their allies. A woman in the audience said that she had never, as she was a German woman, and she said that she had never seen this conversation about eugenics and World War II portrayed amongst families on screen. Like it just hasn't been portrayed. And, you know, when you think about the idea that the term "the apple doesn't fall far from the tree" it's a eugenical Nazi statement. That's how pervasive this stuff is, and how not talking about it just kind of allows it to continue to exist into the 21st century. And that stigma carries itself into the naming of names even. So victims of T4 for basically up until now have had their last names censored without familial clearance. And there are two of the the 6 T4 memorials have actually started publishing the names without consent. And that was a very big deal in Germany and very controversial. But that's how deep the stigma creeps, right? You wouldn't not name a Jewish victim of the Holocaust because they were Jewish or because you hadn't got the consent of their family. No, it's a historical fact that they died. You have the transfer logs. It's known, you know. There's no protection of that.
Oh man, I mean, so where do you go from here, Cameron? What do you feel like you've made this bold statement? You've made this lifelong journey. You and your father. Do you feel like there's more to unpack with this within this realm, or do you feel like you've set the match that's going to light a fire, hopefully, and that you can do other things, and that you're going to do other things. You know, that's just the nature of artistry. But where do you go from this point for you in this film? And are you looking at doing more to follow up? Are you going to do another pilgrimage in 10 years? Where do you feel like you're at with this? Have you discussed this at all?
Yeah, well, I think it's, you know, it's not, we're just scratching the surface right now. And, you know, opening up a lot of potential areas for people to explore and to give people permission to do things about this period of history. And that can be narrative or documentary. You know, one of the major arguments we make in the film is that institutionalization has always been about human warehousing. And that's why it's so great for dictators to disappear people behind 4 walls of a bureaucracy.
Yeah.
You know, so there was a shadow government that was operating behind what appeared to be the functional German government of the Third Reich. And that was
again something that's very familiar to people who follow politics right now. You know?
Yeah. You need the facade of a government to have the shadow government. They both have to be functional and highly detailed and documented. So, you know, that's why one of the taglines of the film is "Erasure always leaves a mark." Really, the film is an act of love that proves that even 60 plus years later, even though there's never been a feature film made that solely focuses on the Action T4 program, told from the perspective of disabled people, we did that. You can always do that. History will inevitably come forward and be told. And, you know, the right people just need to tell it. So that's why remembrance is resistance. And I think that's why this is going to continue to be relevant into the future. You know, we would like to get the film interred in the Library of Congress. We would like to show the film to the United Nations. You know, we have lots of ambitions with the film to get it out there and seen by as many people as possible, because that's really the intention. The purest intention I had with the film is just, I want to shout this from the rooftops so that we can't ever say anymore that we didn't know, you know, that there isn't a film about it. Once you make the film, it dispels that notion, right? Yeah. And especially when you make the film that's had the level of success that this film has had. You know, winning the audience award at Slam Dance in Los Angeles on the stage of the DGA, you know, and the grand jury honorable mention, and then going on to show at some of the most major Jewish film festivals in the United States, including San Francisco Jewish Film Festival and Boston Jewish Film Festival, where we just showed. And we're not coming to those festivals as Jewish people.
No.
We're coming as disabled people that are talking about disability issues and how we need to center T4 in the Holocaust, and how we're not going to stop until every site is made accessible, and not just T4 memorial sites, but public spaces, the trains that take you from Warsaw to Auschwitz, it's all involved, so that's really, you can put your intentions out there, but that's going to take a lot of people, right, to really bring that vision to its full fruition. But I think we start by centering disability in the Holocaust. And in terms of what's next, I do have a narrative, it's like sci-fi, that I'm workshopping right now called Mind Eraser. That's about a fictional town where people start disappearing off the street in black van abductions and are being institutionalized. So this is definitely something for me that's going to continue to give as a subject matter, and I hope for other filmmakers and storytellers as well.
It's going to permeate everything you do from here on forward.
It already did.
Yeah.
You just didn't know that about me yet, So like that was part of the catharsis of getting to make the film, is I could finally explain this part of my life to people. Imagine being in 4th grade, and to 8th grade, and I'm being taken out of class to go to Germany. And what are you going to say to your classmates?
Right.
Oh yeah, we're going to gas chambers in Germany to commemorate disabled people.
Right.
It's just not something that you do or that anybody understands until you see the film. And then you understand that remembrance is activism, that being disabled in public is protest. It's it's an act of resistance. And we're going to these spaces even though they don't welcome us, or because even though they're not accessible, and just we keep showing up.
Anita brought up a point. She said the Who Did What Now podcast recently talked about eugenics and exploring beyond the normal ideas of what we know about things, right? So it's something people might want to check out too. The thing for me,
I just to respond to that really quick, I think it's fascinating that we imagine eugenics as something beyond what someone would usually know about the Holocaust.
Right. Yeah.
Right? It is the Holocaust. Eugenics is the Holocaust.
Yeah.
And that's the reframing that we need to undertake in our understanding.
I apologize for not.
No. That's not our faults. That's the way the history has been told to us, right?
Yeah.
And you don't think to question that history.
You don't.
When you're taught,
because you feel like there's
school.
so much about it out there, right? You feel like there's a lot been covered, but as this documentary does so poignantly, there's a lot that has never been seen before.
And what's really important to, I think, the perspective we have to offer that you won't find anywhere else and in any other podcast or video or whatever about this, is that the memorialization is what we forefront, because even now memorializers, there are memorializers who don't believe that T4 caused the Holocaust, that it enabled it or made it possible.
Right.
It's not. And when you talk about the presenters, the gatekeepers of the information, right? That's crucial. That's critical. And that's not something you're going to hear about other than if you go there yourself, like we did, and talk to them, talk to these people and think about it. And as recently as 2016, there was a conference where T4 experts met. And T4 was separated into 3 phases. There was the T4 official T4 phase, which was about 1 to 2 years, 1940 to 1941, basically, and change. And then there was the wild euthanasia period after the stop order was given. So in the first phase, there's about 90,000 killings. In the wild euthanasia phase, where doctors were just doing this rampantly with whatever methods that they felt they needed to, over 200,000 are killed. And then there's also the 14F13 program, which was where you were expedited to death in T4 facilities, but sent from death camps. So they picked you if you couldn't work, because productivity was at the base of the Nazi argument. They believed that human value was determined only by what you could produce. Right. That's why it says on the gates of Auschwitz, work will set you free. Arbeit macht free. It's because they believed that that was your only value. And so if you showed up to a death camp and you couldn't work, you would be expedited to die in the 14F13 program. So these three phases actually kept the total number from being what we use, which was over 300,000 disabled people that were killed. And it is also a way that kind of the connections were, I think, denied between T4 and the Holocaust, because if you compartmentalized it or sectioned it, it didn't seem all connected in some way. But, you know, that's when you find out that the ovens were transferred from T4 sites to Sobibor, Treblinka, death camps. You find that the staff, the technical staff, was trained in T4 and then sent to the death camps, including high flyers like Christian Wirth, who ended up helping to design the death camps themselves. And then the knowledge transfer. And all of this is there, right? Yeah. But it's just in how the information is presented. And you have to approach it with a disability perspective to start asking the right questions and say, wait, but they had somebody in a doctor's jacket sorting people at Auschwitz. If this wasn't connected to T4, why was that medical guise so important to the Nazis? Right. Why did they even carry it through to the death camps?
Yeah. And, part of what I wanted to talk about with you as well is that you bring up so much of the documentation, and we talked about this the last time we spoke, as a filmmaker, as an artiste, to kind of info dump and bring a part of this information. But it is for the greater good ultimately, because like you said, you're hoping that this is a catalyst for people to go seek the information and look at the information and then utilize that to tell the stories that really truly matter when it comes to this idea. Is that kind of how you felt about, I'm sure at some point in the editing room, you struggled with a lot of presenting this in the way you presented it?
Well, it was very much to the protest of my wonderful editor, Rachel Sophia Stewart. I did not want to do a paper edit for this film because it was very important that the scenes flowed into each other from a camera movement perspective. Sure. Of course. And so we would basically attack different scenes and then we would try a scene and it might or might not work. And then I remember a big denouement moment was Rachel put together my gimbal footage of the Louisiana Funky Butts playing on the grounds of Grafneck. And then we found a shot I thought I couldn't use. It was one of the subjects, memory studies scholar Suzanne Knittel, who opens up the whole film with her idea of the historical uncanny, which if you haven't heard about this ever, check out the book, The Historical Uncanny. It's an incredible entry point into T4 if you're looking for further reading. But her grandmother, basically, she reveals that while she was working on this book, she told her grandmother, I'm working on a book about the Nazi T4 program, having grown up in southern Germany. Her grandmother then mentions, oh yeah, I used to see smoke rising from the crematorium in Grafneck. I watched it from our living room window because their house is on a hill. Mm-hmm. And so that's the level of burial that the history has in German families. Mm-hmm. If you could imagine that a family member wouldn't mention this until their granddaughter says, I'm writing a book about this.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And that's also a commonality with the descendants of victims that whose stories we tell in the film. Mm-hmm. They're third, fourth generation descendants. And in some cases, they actually have to fight through lies that their own family have told them about their family members because of the stigma of potentially not being wanted to be related to somebody with a hereditary disability or being seen as being targeted. So the names in one of our subjects' cases, the names are the name of the person is changed, and his grandmother or his aunt tells him that they died much earlier than they actually. So how he finds this out, it's incredible. At 12 years old, he asked for the birth and the death certificate of this family member.
Yeah,
and he requests the record, and the record keeping place tells him, we don't have anybody under the name Friedrich, but we have somebody under the name Alois. And that's when he finds out that Alois had hydroencephaly, and that the stories of him being dropped on his head as a child were actually attempts at hiding his congenital disability. And so that's, you have to see the film to ultimately appreciate the complexity and the depth of the tale that we tell, and the stories that, these descendants so lovingly relate. But please, if you're going to see it, try to see it in theaters. It's got a 5.1 surround sound mix. It's meant to be seen on the big screen. So the way that you can do that is if you go to disposablehumanity.com, you'll get prompted to sign up for our mailing list, and then you'll never miss when we have a screening. We send out notifications whenever they happen.
Are you aiming at taking this through Europe at any point? Do you feel like that's a goal to get especially the eastern part of Europe to get this out there and seen?
Yeah, it's actually very surprising that the film received its biggest embrace from American film festivals. I actually thought it was going to be the opposite, because there's a great infrastructure for European film festivals. But so far, I haven't received a single call from an international film festival, let alone a German or European one. I'm getting, there's things I can't talk about, but I do want to put it out there that more international film festivals need to jump on this film and look and notice the success that it's having in the States.
So writing this narrative, the science fiction narrative that you're currently involved in and figuring out and what you're doing toward the future, are you and what we've talked about, given what we've talked about and how Hollywood placates the ego of villainy and kind of does the sugarcoating and the things of that nature, are you looking at telling stories a little differently now? Are you kind of like, I have no fear of what I'm going to do, right? I'm going to go right for it and do the thing that I want to do, because one, I'm a storyteller at heart, right? And two, I'm an artist, but also now I have laid it all out there where I stand and who I am. Do you feel like that's going to be a part of your narrative from here forward? Or do you feel like you can still kind of romanticize storytelling in some aspect?
I mean, I think this is only one part of me, right? There's another, this was a big thing to get off my back, right? It was a film that explained a lot that I had in me that I couldn't relate in any other way but through a film, right? So when you see the film, you'll see why. But there's there's a whole other part of me out there in the narrative realm that I feel like now that I've made this film, I can make other films, and I hope to channel the investigation and the inspiration of this film, because it has all of that. You know, I put all of myself into this film,
right?
In terms of that. So yeah, I would just say, like, I take this film forward with me, and I hope to basically achieve, and I can't even say surpass, because, you know, I just think there's aspects of this film that can't be topped, quote unquote,
Sure.
or recreated.
Sure.
Because it's 25 years of my family's research. It's literally
personal.
It's a lifetime of work.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And it's so personal, and you being who you are as an artist probably even was more even laser focused, because you wanted to make sure that the personal aspect of this got the magic touch that you have with the camera, I would imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah. You know, there's work I've done since this that I think I see as, you know, the next step, so to say. You know,
so you're still growing, basically.
Yeah. Oh yeah. At every project, you know, every project is its own problem to solve. It's its own puzzle to solve in terms of approach. How, like, I feel like a big motif of my work that I've identified is that I try to figure out how to embed the meaning of the film into the cinematography and the music. And we were actually interviewed by a Harvard professor and one of his colleagues at the film festival this weekend. And they astutely observed, as a filmmaker teacher, that they said they had never seen a film that interplayed with the music in the way that this film quite does, and the camera movement in the way that this film quite does. And they were asking, like, what was your process with the composition of the music? And, you know, I had to give Andre Barros, our Portuguese composer, his credit. And, you know, it was just a great match. And Andre has worked on several of my projects in the meantime. He scored Elsa, which is a doc short available right now on PBS in the video app. And on YouTube.
It's fucking incredible. It's fucking incredible.
So thanks. And so you can see a bit of how our dynamic in that film too. And what was interesting about that film is he wrote the score before I even shot it. So I had the score of Elsa with me, and I was playing it with my producer Julia in the car on the way to film Elsa. And that was amazing to have that, because it was like I could already channel the rhythm, the pacing, the timing. You know, I'm very inspired by, like, Edgar Wright's work in Baby Driver. You know, how they were constantly shooting, and then they had a computer right on set, and they would take it and they would cut it in, and they would check because of how rhythmic, you know, like the opening car chase scene was, for instance. I think that you have to think about music that critically in film, because it is such a rhythm. Like, even in our film, the cadence of the interviewees is important. And the other really brilliant thing that the Harvard guys noticed was that there was music underneath interview, and what it was doing, it was pulling you into the act of research, because you know, normally you might have an industrial talking head or something, talking head, straight shot of the document that they're talking about, you know, and then a punch in. And they remarked that the way we filmed it was you could tactilely hear the paper of the photographs and the documents rustling in the descendants' hands. And we were framing them off side because it was about the fragility of those documents and how the fragility of our connection to the past.
And I mean, music is also a mood setter. So, I mean, it's going to set up the darkness that you explore as well, and do that. Cameron, this has just been a phenomenal conversation as always. I love to always talking to you. You're an amazing soul, and you've done an incredible thing here. I'm so proud of watching you grow and being, having been a part of the first journey you took in slam dance, and now where you're at and who you are, and seeing that and talking to you every time that we have this. I could do that over and over and over again. And congratulations on all your success. I mean, I know that's not what this is about, but it has garnered that for you, and I'm very happy it has. So congratulations, my friend, and thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about all this, because I know this was a dark subject matter and a really difficult thing for anybody to experience. So
yeah, well, if you take any one thing away from the film, it's that if somebody's telling you not to go somewhere, that's probably where the film is, so just like we've seen with recent films, there's success to be had in those corners, and we have to be brave and turn towards what we think is dark or difficult and face it to truly understand it.
Awesome. All right, everybody. Well, that is our show. Thank you for joining us, 21 Grams. And we'll be back next week with another great episode. Until then, remember that it's always time to go any now. We'll see you again soon. Bye, everybody.